What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 17th, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting at long, slow, glide down to Pauhana Friday, and whatever other insanity is about to ensue. I got to tell you, where was that old phrase from? The more things change. Excuse me, I seem to be having some pollen issues. The more things change, the more they stay insane. That certainly seems to be the case here. And again, it is very frustrating to see the government just still, the deep state, at war with the elected President Donald Trump. And again, I'm sort of disappointed with a lot of what Trump has decided to do. But the infighting has just reached a ridiculous level. I don't think we've ever seen a political faction fight in the Congress and the White House this much on public display in the nation's history. And everybody's picking up on it, of course. Over at governmentslaves.info, they're basically saying an attempted political coup now taking place in D.C. with effort to impeach Trump for fabricated obstruction of justice charge. They've been trying all these things, one after the other. First, it was the dossier about Trump and the prostitutes in the Moscow hotel, and that one cratered. Then they were out there with, Russia hacked the election to help Donald Trump, and Russia hacked the DNC emails, and that one's now falling apart because of the new evidence that's surfacing around the murder of Seth Rich. And so now they're out here saying, well, he obstructed justice. And they're already out there fanning this over at rawstory.com, where I am now banned from commenting, I might add. They're basically saying, get ready, there's more damaging information coming out from James Comey. And they're out there trying to say, the New York Times was read over the phone a quote from what purports to be a memo by James Comey. There's no provenance for it whatsoever. And given that nothing was ever found in the Flynn investigation, it makes no sense that Trump would have asked for it to be stopped. This could be Comey's attempt at revenge, or this could be the full court press to just gin up something they can try and impeach Donald Trump on, or further smear his reputation. Now, here's a telling factor. Why the delay? If Comey knew Trump had attempted to obstruct justice back during the Michael Flynn investigation, why didn't he say it at the time? He was obligated to as head of the FBI. Even Trey Gowdy is out there saying we shouldn't take this at face value. We have to have the actual memo itself. We need the context. We need to know how Comey reacted. We don't have enough information. We don't even know if it's genuine at this point. And Gowdy is saying we need to get Comey before Congress under oath and find out what this is really about, if there's any there. Now, Jason Chavitz has called for the FBI to turn over copies of all of Comey's notes, memos, and recordings related to Donald Trump. So they're going to be taking a look through there. Because if this reported memo is a fake or something that's been recently created, it won't be in the Department of Justice FBI archives, we hope. Who knows what they're going to do. Over at CNN, Dana Bash basically came on out and as much as admitted this Comey memo is just another attempt by the deep state for revenge against Donald Trump. And we've seen all these hysterical headlines just all over the place, just trying to overwhelm the American people by screaming at them, Trump has to go, Trump has to go, Trump has to go. Now, Vladimir Putin is out there. This is getting on back to the Donald Trump revealed highly classified information in this Russia meeting. And that accusation that was also run in the New York Times was based on anonymous intelligence officials who apparently were not actually in the room at the time. So how they knew what was going on begs explanation. Now, McMaster's was there, and he said all Trump told him was there was a concern that somebody was going to make exploding laptops, and for the sake of airline safety, we're talking about banning laptops from the cabin. They must be checked so that TSA can steal them. And Putin is saying that they've got transcripts of what happened at the meeting. and they're willing to turn them on over, because everything that was discussed in the meeting had been all over the corporate media only the week before. There were no secrets. And a little reminder, the president does have the authority to declassify information and share information with other governments, especially pertaining to terrorism and airline flight safety, which is what this discussion was all about. Now, Ron Paul is out there commenting on Russiagate. Is there really a national security threat, or is it just more politics? And obviously, it's just more politics. And even Ron Paul is out there saying that when you look at the media, all at the top of the articles and headline, oh, national security threat, national security threat, and then McMaster's refutation of what was about classified information being talked about is buried down in the 8th paragraph. This is how the newspapers like to bias things. They'll put the sensational headline up at the top, and this may have happened, and the rumors and the innuendos, and then down at the bottom they'll say, well, there's a clarification and it's being officially denied, so that they can dodge potential lawsuits. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates, just now rejoining our network, and we're talking about this very obvious ramping up by the deep state, the establishment, the Democrats, the media, the oligarchs, trying to find a way to get rid of Donald Trump because he is resisting going on down this path to global war and conquest. Apparently a lot of people that are trying to take down Trump are doing so out of a concern that they themselves are looking at arrests. Right now, we have a president who is not going to be covering up and protecting these scandals, we hope. We certainly have an attorney general who does not seem to be on the side of covering up for some of these egregious acts that have been going on. And with Comey's firing, potential replacement, all these people who were involved in election fraud, the Clinton Foundation, the murder of Seth Rich, they're feeling exposed, and that's why they're fighting back. They're trying to get rid of Donald Trump, and probably already they've made a deal with Mike Pence. If we make you the president, you will keep us safe and secure. Remember back during Watergate, when that was building to a head, and it looked like Nixon was either going to be impeached or forced to resign, and there was this little shuffle where Vice President Spiro T. Agnew was kicked out of his office on a relatively minor charge and replaced with Gerald Ford. And there was a reason for that. At the dark heart of Watergate was a link from the Nixon administration to the JFK assassination. And Gerald R. Ford had been on the Warren Commission. So he knew what the secrets were, and he knew what he was going to be obligated to keep under wraps in the aftermath of Watergate. And of course, as soon as Nixon resigned and Gerald Ford became president, he issued blanket pardons to everybody, declared our long national nightmare is over, and that was the end of any asking of any questions as to what was really going on with Watergate. I mean, Nixon's re-election against George McGovern was a study in foregone conclusions. The burglary never made sense in the context of winning re-election. He was already there. He won re-election by the huge margin. So something else was going on. And what had happened was the Democrats had gotten hold of photos of the 3 tramps from Dealey Plaza that were clear enough to identify them as associates of Richard Nixon, and one of them a known CIA agent. That's what the Watergate burglars were after. So, article over here, desperation panic has set in, the takedown has begun. The corporate media is just putting out fake news after fake news after fake news. The Washington Post is making a big deal over Trump gave classified information to Russia. Well, nothing that he told the Russians was classified, and even if it was, he has the authority to do that as president. And then, of course, the revelation that Seth Rich was the DNC leak to WikiLeaks. And that's pulled the rug out from this whole idea that Russia hacked the DNC servers. It just didn't happen. Seth Rich was the leak. 44,000 emails. He got out of there before he was killed. And that's why the corporate media is desperate. They've been caught in another piece of flat-out propaganda against Russia. And they're running scared. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show because there's some weird things going on over at Fox News. Rosie O'Donnell is out there on a rant again. I remember back when Rosie O'Donnell was talking about, questions about 9/11 and everything. Now she's completely on the other side. She's hinting at violence against President Trump. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And I hope the Secret Service talks to her, because that is a serious matter when you're out there implying, suggesting, or even possibly encouraging violence against the president. Over the 20-odd years that I have been doing my website and the 10 years I've been doing radio, as much as I opposed the policies of the various presidents, that's First Amendment freedom of speech. Calling for violence against them, that's illegal, and you shouldn't be doing it. And also, I don't believe in getting into personal attacks. Some of the stuff that was said about Michelle Obama was just really quite hateful, and in my opinion, very much over the line. Let's see. Colonel Schaefer is out there saying the White House and America itself is under siege by the media using weaponized information. Greg Jarrett is out there saying Comey's revenge is a gun without any powder in it. We certainly hope so. And again, if that memo does not exist in the copies that Jason Chaffetz just requested from the FBI, then we know it's a fake, a hoax. We're going to take a phone call. Brandon in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I called about saving the Trump presidency, but I want to back up to the aquaponics system. It is closed loop. What happens is you feed these fish first, and then they generate.
Okay, Brandon. Enough with the aquaponics. Let's talk about the Trump presidency.
Yeah, sorry about that. So anyway, Cernovich and Corsi are saying that we cannot fight these folks with logic and truth because they're just using a propaganda tactic against us, and they're consuming all our time and energy with these narratives, and it's just a wasted effort. There are strategies to fight propaganda and these tactics properly, and he goes into detail. He's writing an article today. It'll be on InfoWars tomorrow with strategies to fight this propaganda. What I'm thinking is we need to prioritize the threats that we're facing. And I've mentioned before that what really happened, and InfoWars should combine forces and mobilize patriots in phone calls or letter writing or blogging to push back against these propaganda tools they're using. And it is weaponized media. And I'm viewing MSN now as an enemy of the state. They are treasonous, and this needs to be on the tip of our tongue. I tell my friends, anything you see on the TV is a total lie, and you can believe exactly the opposite of what you're seeing. Let's see. I do believe that Saudi Arabia and Israel are working together to destroy the United States, and that's something that we should be promoting, that idea, because I believe we are under the most crucial moment in our history, and if we lose this battle, we are going to lose the republic, and I am not trying to be dramatic. This is such a critical state we're at. But once again, what really happened, InfoWars, we need to combine forces of patriots and start phone calls, protests. We're getting our butts kicked, Mike.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that that is accurate. I mean, most of what I'm seeing in terms of a reaction of all these news is outrage from people saying, do they really think we're going to believe this? I have been trying to talk to the independent media for quite a while, saying that we should merge together and form an entity that can rival some of the corporate media outlets in terms of resources, reach, and so forth. Unfortunately, there is a lot of rivalries, some of them fanned up intentionally, between media outlets, and InfoWars and WhatReallyHappened.com. We have a split over the subject of Israel, and so I don't expect that's ever going to happen. So, but what is really most important is we don't even really need to get organized. All we need to do to push back against the propaganda is to simply go on out and say, this is obvious propaganda. These are the same people who told us Saddam had nuclear weapons, and they're just out there trying to reverse the will of the American voter. We're seeing a coup d'etat starting in our own country, and we should not sit still for it.
And it's working. That's the problem. Me personally, I'm in San Francisco, and if I went downtown and protested, I'd be one man among many. But I know there are patriots here in the Bay Area. I'm not very versed at connecting, and I don't do Facebook anymore. But there has to be a way where we can start groups and gather momentum. And this is such a wonderful platform. And I think prioritizing our threats are crucial. And I know the mainstream media is an enemy of the state, and they should
No. The corporate media is friends with the state, and they are both enemies of the American people.
Right. We're talking the true state, though, the republic, the people. And, yeah, we should clarify. They're hand in hand to destroy us. And, Mike, it's time. We got to do something, and keep up the good work.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot, Brandon. We're going to let you go. And getting on back to the issue, there does appear to be the beginning of a coup d'etat against the democratically elected President of the United States of America. And we're seeing an article over at RINF.com, Turncoats from Within the Trump Administration to Push for Impeachment. Now, everyone's talking impeachment, and how real is it? Not really there, for reasons I'll elucidate in a minute here. But it's just another way of tarnishing Donald Trump. Oh, there's a sealed indictment against him. Oh, he may have done this, he may have done that. Oh, they're talking impeachment. He's terrible. We've got to... And it's just part of trying to whittle away at his administration. Now, the reality is that it would take a majority vote in the House of Representatives to impeach Donald Trump. That's the first step. To remove him from office, that takes a 2/3 vote of the Senate, and both houses of the Congress are still under the control of the GOP. So you're talking about a lot of Republican members of Congress switching sides to go along with this, and I think that's really a long shot, especially when the only evidence, and I'm not even sure I should call it that, of obstruction of justice is a hearsay comment over the phone to the New York Times. Pat Buchanan is out there saying, at this point, the media and the Democrats want to overturn the results of last November's election. One of the most alarming things I keep seeing in these various articles against Trump is the necessity to correct the mistake the American voters made. Okay, you don't get to judge that. We, the American voters, are ultimately supposed to be in charge of who's going to be in the government. And you don't get to sit up there and say, well, they made a mistake, so we're going to undo it. Because that makes a travesty of the whole democratic election process. And it reminds us the elections are just for show. Even Nancy Pelosi is saying a Trump impeachment is not going to happen, and stop listening to the fake news. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, I just heard that other caller before. I was just walking through the door, as a matter of fact. And I agree. We got to unite the alternate media and people who know, who real patriots have to unite. And we got to put aside those small differences, like you and InfoWars.
Well, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to do it, but it takes, it takes two. I've tried to reach out to Alex. I tried to sound a warning about Pizzagate, that it was a setup, and he never responds to me. So, I'm willing to be part of a larger organization now. I'm tired of doing everything all by myself. I'm ready to be part of a large organization, but unfortunately there are a lot of personality clashes going on in the independent media, which is not helping. Anyway, Mark, stay on the line. Stay on the line. I'll bring you right back after the commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Mark in North Carolina, and Mark, you said you had one more thing you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it's not only, you know, the difference between you and Alex Jones, and I think Jones supporters should be calling him and telling him to bury the hatchet, and I'll try to get, it's very hard to get through, especially at times. The other thing is like Richie Allen. I really love listening to Richie Allen. I think the guy is great.
Yes.
But he's almost like, has it in for InfoWars, because again, he differs in a few things. He says about the Muslims, but Jones makes it clear that the problem with the Islamists coming into this country is it's being because of the turmoil they're causing in the Middle East, and it's basically what Richie Allen says too. So there's a lot of different. There's a certain amount of differences, but basically, pretty much the alternate people on the what I call the patriotic side are you know, pretty much in the same boat. We pretty much think alike, except for a few minor differences, which shouldn't split us like that. And the same thing with a guy like John B. Wells. I know this Wells, since he was kicked up, and you know, wrongly kicked off of Coast to Coast, him and Jones haven't even talked since then. They've never been, and he every once in a while he'll make a snide remark about Jones and this and that. I understand he's angry with Nori, and that was a low blow, and I very seldom listen to Coast after that. But the fact of the matter is, that wasn't Jones' fault because of Nori, you know. So, you know, people got to need to put, and they basically have the same guests coming on, and people just got to put away these differences and start being alone, because you see what the globalists are doing.
Yes.
They want a coup. What they're trying to do with Donald Trump. Now, I have my differences. I certainly know what he did in Syria. That's unforgivable as far as I'm concerned. But for crying out loud, the guy at least is a lot better than anything the Democrats will put up right now, or anything the Republicans put up right now. And the Republican Party, they're in a lot of ways, they're even more treacherous than the Democrats. What I suggest we do is we make it clear to Republicans, you all want to be ever get into power again, better stop it, better unite. I called my congressman today, Mark Meadows, and I told him, I says, you know, I'm not going to, you know, I want to see some fire coming out of your mouth. Well, he's got a position. That's some intern answer. I said, I don't care about his position, man, on the internet. I want to know his position. I want him to come out in public, and I want to breathe some fire to stand up for Trump, stand against these globalist scum that are trying to take over this country. And then I called my old congressman in Texas, Mac Thornberry, another useless. Actually, I'm sorry, that Meadows is actually pretty good, but this guy Thornberry is useless.
Okay, Mark, you're kind of rambling, and we need you to sum up because we're coming up on another commercial break here.
Basically, united we stand, divided we fall.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And you know, I've been actually trying to talk to the various heads of the various independent media for a long time, saying we need to sort of come together. But there are, unfortunately, sadly, some very gigantic egos out there that want to be the star of their own little universe, and it does get in the way. And there's a lot of hurt feelings and bad blood out there. Some of the larger independent media outlets they're in competition with each other, and that also complicates the situation.
Even a guy like David Duke, you know, I have my difference. A lot of difference.
Yeah.
For crying out loud, a lot of things he says are true. We got to, you know, what's that thing? You got to separate the chain from the something or another.
Well, yeah, that's also preserving a diversity of opinion. And, you know, we need to be very careful of independent media that starts acting like the corporate media, in that there is an allowed agenda, and then there's other stuff that is banned. One of the cool things about working here at RBN is nobody taps me on the shoulder and says, don't do that story, or they don't tap me on the shoulder and say, please do this story on the air. And so probably, in my experience, RBN is certainly the freest independent media network that there is, because they don't put any constraints or controls on their hosts whatsoever. And we've even gotten phone calls to this show where they're saying, well, some of the other hosts on RBN are saying the direct opposite of you. And say, yeah, that's what debate and discussion is supposed to be about, and that's what the First Amendment is about. It is up to you as the listener to figure out for yourself who is making sense and who is likely smoking opium. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Mark. We'll be right back. And And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the White House and what appears to be a concerted effort to force the elected president of the United States out of office by media smear, by leak, by undermining him. Even CNBC is saying a lot of what is being done against Trump right now is clearly illegal. And it all seems to be the argument from the media that Trump is arrogant, he's sloppy, and all the rest of that. But the Constitution sets specific grounds for impeachment: treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Obviously, obstruction of justice is one of those, but the case isn't made. And Trey Gowdy pointed that out. What we have here is a report in the New York Times based on a reading of a supposed memo over the telephone from an anonymous source. That's it. That's the entire grounds for the case. They've got no more to support this idea of obstruction of justice than they did that Russia was giving away classified information, or that he was cavorting with prostitutes in a Moscow hotel. It's just death by media smear. And I can understand why Donald Trump is very angry with the corporate media. Now, according to another report coming on out, apparently H.R. McMaster and his deputy Dina Powell have been identified as leaking to the anti-Trump media. Trump needs to clean out that White House. We were hearing rumors earlier in the week about a major staff shakeup. It needs to happen right now. And I'm not talking about just the press secretary. I'm talking about all of these people who are working against Donald Trump in his own staff. And again, this underscores a comment I made about him coming into the White House. He's very naive. He comes from the world of business, where people keep their promises and they are loyal to the company that is employing them. And Trump is still operating on that basis, or at least he was. I'm sure he's getting a wake-up call now, that you can have people on your payroll. You can have given them a very powerful position and a very good paycheck, and they are still not going to be working for you. They're going to be working for your enemies. Apparently, outside Maxine Waters' home, there's been a protest there calling for her impeachment. So everyone's getting impeachment fever. Let's impeach the whole government. All right, so let's talk about Seth Rich. That is definitely bubbling up here, and we're seeing articles all over the place, like this one from Investment Watch blog. Did Clinton and Podesta order the murder of Seth Rich? And it's a reasonable question to ask, given the long chain of dead bodies under suspicious circumstances behind the Clintons, and that email where John Podesta said, I want to make an example of a suspected leaker, even if we don't have a real basis for knowing who they are. In other words, he wanted to make a bloody example of somebody. And here is a blockbuster little tidbit that only just now surfaced. Somebody leaked the original police report from the officers who found Seth Rich following the shooting, and he was still alive. He was conscious and breathing, and later died at the hospital. He wasn't found dead. He was still alive. And supposedly, he would be in a position to say, thus and such a person shot me. And the police had body cams, but the videos are missing, cannot be found. So that's getting kind of tacky there. Let's see. Let's grab a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just was listening to you talk about impeachment and so on. And by the way, I absolutely, and I know you believe from the very beginning that this Seth Rich thing stunk to high heaven. And in my opinion, outright, it was a murder. It was a hit. And it's, you know, the people we have to blame are Podesta and Hillary and Obama and whoever else might be involved in this. But let me just say, ever since the Patriot Act, it has been impossible, really, to impeach a president, because with a total surveillance state, if you can find 2 or 3 people in Congress who might be clean, maybe their kids aren't, or maybe their parents aren't, or their brothers and sisters, there's some way to get to almost everybody.
Yes.
But so that's what the intelligence establishment, Mike, in the hands of a commander-in-chief who is in control of the intelligence establishment, which nobody truly is, but at least if they're not at war with them. However, now we have impeachment is still impossible by anybody unless they have the acquiescence of the intelligence community. The intelligence community can almost do it by themselves, just like they're doing now, leaking, going to their megaphone, their mockingbird people in the press, the people that they own, unattributed leaks, wiretaps, everything else. And if they're not in on it, no matter who else is on it, it won't work. They can suborn anybody trying to impeach, or they can suborn anybody, period.
Yeah, that's always the danger of the surveillance state. And again, going on back to this Obamagate investigation, it's come out from multiple sources that yes, Obama was spying, committing political spying against Trump, against members of Congress, Rand Paul, and shortly before he was assassinated, Justice Scalia said that he thought the Supreme Court was being surveilled by the Obama administration. And that makes a lot of sense because, remember, Chief Justice Roberts was opposed to Obamacare, and then the 11th hour does a 180-degree turn, says it's constitutional under the Commerce Clause, cast the deciding vote on Obamacare, and then he actually left the country for a week to go on vacation to Malta. Yeah. Went to Malta, I think.
Crete.
He went to Crete. All right. Well, wherever it is he went to, he got out of town because he didn't want to deal with the reporters.
Well, Mike, if the whole Russian hacking thing has never had any real weight except for the deep state that was trying to basically misdirect us over there. But it's basically Obama was doing, in my opinion, Obama was doing that all along, and denying that there was any hacking, denying that there was any interference in Bernie's or Trump's election or anybody else in the primaries, even though it was apparent that they were. And then as soon as he won and he was losing control unexpectedly of this intelligence apparatus and all this information would be in the hands of the people who it was used upon, then once he's the Russians. And the deep state, which has been involved in it and is acquiescent in it and would be exploded if it ever came out, that they were so involved in our political process, they're agreeing with it and they're going right along with it. And, of course, the people who like war.
Oh, yeah, the war hawks are definitely out there because Donald Trump so far has gone along with the war agenda. He's had 2 botch-ups. There was that cruise missile attack on Syria where most of them cruise missiles didn't hit the target, and then they dropped the Moab on Afghanistan, and that turned out to be a fizzle, nowhere near the devastating explosion that it's supposed to be. And it just underscores the fact that much of our military isn't really working all that well. For all the money poured into it, the weapons simply don't work. And the strategy seems to be, well, we'll just fling 20 out there and at least one will get through.
Mike, can I make one more point? And I want to say that I agree with what you're saying there as well, but you've always said it's not really, we're not there, the military is not there to win. It's there just to consume military products and to feed the industry. You've said that a million times. You're absolutely right.
Well, but not all the time. Not all the time. Sometimes victory is desired, but certainly in the case of Vietnam, you talk to especially the pilots who were sent out to bomb these suspected truck parks, which were always just these empty fields. And yeah, that's what it was all about, grinding up the munitions in order to soak the American taxpayer to buy replacements that would then be dropped on empty fields, and it just went on and on and on.
Mike, the last point I want to make is that the obstruction of justice that Comey is basically initiating by saying that he was asked to call off on Flynn. What about the obstruction of justice by Comey himself? What about the investigation into Mark Rich? What about the investigation into Hillary? What about all the investigations that went nowhere under this idiot that really ought to be under a jail?
Well, so, again, it's the double standard and the hypocrisy. They're going to scream obstruction of justice when they think they can use it as a weapon against Donald Trump. And all the other obstruction of justice, that's just business as usual. But again, the reason for this major push, I think they're literally thinking about finding a way to get rid of Donald Trump before he can appoint a new head of the FBI. Because if Trump gets somebody as head of the FBI who's really going to be looking at the crimes, then these people, Hillary Clinton, Podesta, all of them, are in serious, serious trouble. And so I think the goal here is to get rid of Trump or get him so scared of impeachment that he'll go along with appointing an FBI director who will continue to protect the real criminals in our society.
That acting director, Mike, is the guy who didn't disclose that his wife took $600,000 from the Democratic Party, from Clinton, basically, remember?
Yeah, no, we talked about that when Comey first stepped down, and I said his deputy is just as dirty.
Yeah. So they need to clean house there big time, and it's a matter of life and death maybe for Trump, and I think maybe he's just starting to realize that, really.
Yeah, well, Donald, what can I tell you? You should have been listening to me all along. I tried to warn you, but you know. All right.
Amen, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go. We got a couple more phone calls, then we're going to get back to the news here. Chris in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you today?
Doing fine.
What's on my mind is the laptop bombs. Now, is it really plausible or feasible to make a laptop into an explosive, or will that... I don't think it's the work, or even more than a toothpaste tube.
Yeah, I mean...
A pair of underwear or shoes.
First of all, there is virtually no room in a laptop. And yes, I've had people talk to me about the battery compartment, but, you know, you just flip the laptop open and turn it on, and then they know there's a real battery in the battery compartment. The reason the story appears to be bogus is because for an explosive to be effective, it's not just the chemicals it is made out of, it is how it is shaped and tamped. And if you just have an explosive poured into a laptop, spreading to all the available space, it's going to be this kind of a spider web structure. And it'll certainly deflagrate with a great deal of smoke and noise, but it's not going to be a detonation. It's not going to create a shock wave. It's going to be pretty much ineffective. Frankly, high-end digital cameras are more suited to that sort of thing. Because if you take off the lens, whether it's a digital camera or a film camera, there is a single volume space in there that's more appropriate. But they're not talking about banning digital cameras. For some reason, it's just the computers. And I don't know, it's because they may be setting up a system where all the computers get examined while they're in the checked luggage. But it really does not make a lot of sense. It just seems to be more gratuitous booga-booga to make our lives miserable while we're traveling.
Now, the second part of my question is, what is going on with this intelligence that Trump feels that he needs to share with Russia that seems bogus to begin with? I mean, we get a page of intelligence that comes out of Israel that might as well have come out of slight intelligence.
Yes.
And it's no more credible than the missile attack on the Idlib base that Trump pulled off with all the tomahawks. I mean, both of these things are call to action on illegitimate reasons.
Well, we need to remember Israel has a long history of planting or giving us fake intelligence to demonize people with. Remember the laptop of death that tried to claim Iran was building nuclear weapons, and nuclear engineers looked at it and said, this stuff is nonsense. It's clippings off the internet. None of this is going to work. And it turned out Israel had created this laptop. They sort of propaganda laundered it through the MEK group, who turned it over to somebody who turned it over to somebody to sort of hide the trail of where it really came from. And this appears to be more of the same. And I don't know exactly what the goal here is, but it seems very impractical to me for a laptop to be turned into a bomb. And in any event, aren't there already chemical detectors in use at the security gate to check for explosives? Just take that little cotton pad and swipe it over the outside of the computer, along with the luggage, and you'll be fine.
I just think it's dangerous going along with Israel intelligence to run the war against terror when Israel supports ISIS.
Well, our government is supporting ISIS as well. It certainly was covertly during...
I mean, they give them medical help. I've been fighting with them. They've given them medical help. They've pretty much helped them take the Golan Heights and hold that area as far as ISIS goes.
Well, I loved it a couple of weeks ago when ISIS accidentally shot some of the IDF, and they actually issued a public apology. We're sorry. We didn't mean to do that. Anyway, listen, Chris, I got to let you go. I want to fit in one more phone call before the commercial break. Frank in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, yes. Interesting about Trump's impeachment. I think it's all a bunch of nonsense. The mainstream media has been losing viewership over the last 10 years. Their ratings down to nil. And they run an algorithm knowing what are the key phrases. And, impeachment, they're hoping to get viewers back. So much of the alternative or independent media took so much viewership away from them. They're desperate, and they are creating this type of news. You can see it by the congressmen shills that they have that are saying impeachment, and then, they go out there and we got to impeach Trump, and then everybody runs with the, Fox, CNN, ABC, the CNBC News, Washington Post, and they're all in it together, but they're losing, Mike. They're losing so much viewership. You look around today, and I'll be very honest, the restaurants and airports and hotels that play the news, nobody's watching. Everybody's looking at their phone or talking, and they're losing so much, and they have to create the last desperation of trying to create some type of heightened awareness, something with Trump, to please maybe the Hillary Clinton supporters or the Sanders supporters.
You could actually be right. This could all be about ratings. We need to drive our ratings up. We need to get the viewers back, so we're going to scream for impeachment. And that's a really dumb reason to go after the President of the United States of America, because you're going to get more viewers. Boy.
Well, look, when they lost as much over the last 10 years, you know what really done it for them? And I'll be honest, it was the Iraq War and the lie. I mean, it's a weapon of mass destruction. Everybody believed it. And then you lost 100,000 troops, either killed, wounded, injured. And people are saying, well, wait a minute, the media lies. And then along comes independent media, guys like you and Mr. Statmiller and Alex Jones and Red Ice Radio. They're saying...
I'm going to have to let you go. I apologize. We ran out of time. We're on the commercial break. We're going to close the phone lines for a while and do news. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about the murder of Seth Rich and the revelation that he was still alive when the police arrived, and now the video from the police officers' body cams has disappeared. So whatever Seth Rich told to the police is now gone, and apparently he died later at the hospital. Fox News earlier today had a story up that the FBI knew within 96 hours after the shooting that Seth Rich was in contact with WikiLeaks. And that story is already being Orwellized, because when you click on that link now, it goes to another one of these stories about how Seth Rich's family is out there just furious about this claim that he was leaking to WikiLeaks. It's on his laptop. The evidence is there. So there is reason for reopening the investigation. Remember, the official story is it was a robbery gone wrong. But he still had his wallet, very expensive watch, and his cell phone, which are things that are generally included in the robbing of somebody. His body had bruises on it indicating that he'd been in some kind of a struggle. There was a fight. And then he was shot twice in the back, and they didn't take anything. Now, another question is, why hasn't the DNC offered a reward for information related to his murder? He supposedly worked for them. No, we're just going to let it go away. Well, not exactly, because apparently a Washington, D.C. lobbyist has offered a reward. Okay? For information, attorney Jack Berkman is offering $100,000 of his own money for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. The D.C. Metropolitan Police are offering a $25,000 reward, and WikiLeaks is also offering a $20,000 reward for any information that leads to a conviction in the murder of Seth Rich. There's a lot of money out there for somebody who's willing to go up against the Clintons. But yeah, they're talking. There is a reward, just not from the Democrats. They don't want any questions answered. And of course, remember the Democrats in the corporate meeting. Oh, they ignored it. No big deal. Robberies happen all the time. It's no big deal. And they're still out there pushing Russia hacked the DNC, even though clearly we have now confirmed the DNC emails were not hacked, they were leaked. The claim that the Russians had hacked the DNC was based on the analysis by a private company working for the Hillary campaign, CloudStrike, which has now pulled back and said our analysis may have been faulty. There is zero evidence Russia had anything to do with this. The FBI was never allowed to look at the servers or do a forensic analysis. That's it. Seth was the leak. We've got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and we're talking about the revelations coming on out about Seth Rich's murder. That he was, in fact, WikiLeaks' source for the DNC emails. The Russians had nothing to do with it, and still they're out there on the corporate media. Oh, well, the Russians hacked the DNC. The Russians did this. The Russians did that. And it's almost like their whole idea is we're just going to throw so many lies at the American people. Sooner or later, they'll just get tired of being skeptical, and they'll start believing again. It's not going to work, but at this point, you would think the corporate media would have learned some lessons over the disasters they had happening last year and this year. But their corporate masters don't care. Corporate masters are going to keep on paying them to lie until all of their audience is gone. Then they'll just shut down and fire all these people. Julian Assange is out there basically saying that the CIA is the world's most dangerously incompetent spy agency. And apparently this was in response to the CIA branding him a friend of terrorists. And apparently CIA spokesperson Heather Fritz Horniak told Russia Today in an email, dictators and terrorists have no better friend in the world than Julian Assange, as theirs is the only privacy he protects. So it's a war of words. And basically, this is in response to the revelation through WikiLeaks that the CIA has a special hacker unit set up that specializes in hacking into other people's computers and planting digital fingerprints to lay a false trail to somebody else. Now, back when they were still trying to claim that the Russians had hacked the DNC servers, they claimed it was because they knew it because of the digital fingerprints. And WikiLeaks undermined that. Now we know that the hacking never even occurred to begin with. It was a leak by Seth Rich. The CIA is angry that their bad behavior is now on full display for the world to see. That they're not the good guys. Now, Judicial Watch has filed a lawsuit under the Freedom of Information Act against the Department of Justice for all the FBI records regarding that Trump dossier, where Donald Trump and 2 prostitutes spoiled a mattress in the Moscow hotel, which is already pretty much discredited. But Judicial Watch wants to find out just where this came from. Now, we all know that this former MI6 agent, Christopher Steele, came up with it, and he was paid to come up with it. Through his private firm, Orbis Business Intelligence. And Judicial Watch wants to know from whom he was getting paid. And the Department of Justice refused the records, and they don't have legal grounds to do so. The privacy provisions of the Freedom of Information Act do not apply here, and so now Judicial Watch is having to sue. And speaking of disappearing things, apparently, the FBI is now shuffling its feet and saying the laptop that held copies of Clinton's emails has gone missing. And apparently there was a technical worker who had a laptop on which backup copies of Hillary Clinton's emails were being kept. Now, the emails were deleted, but the hard drive was not wiped, meaning emails could be recovered from this. And for some strange reason, the FBI said, can you mail us the laptop? And that was the last anybody ever saw of it. It went into the U.S. Post Office, and that's it. The laptop is gone. Golly gee shuckies. It was lost in the mail. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Now, the other day we were talking about this coming White House staff shakeup. And there was speculation that Fox News host Kimberly Guilfoyle might replace Sean Spicer as the White House press secretary. Fox News has come on out reminding everybody that Kimberly is under a long-term contract with Fox News, and they have no intentions of letting her go. So she will be staying at Fox. And again, we don't have confirmation that Sean Spicer is going to be fired, but we do know that the deputy press secretary has been conducting most of the news briefings for the last week. But again, I agree, there needs to be a major staff shakeup at that White House. Trump needs to get people in that White House who are going to be loyal to him, who are going to do what they're told, keep their mouths shut, and be part of a coherent, functioning administration. Okay, getting on over to the war zones. You probably have noticed there's all of a sudden a new propaganda campaign ramping up against Syria. Oh, Syria's evil. Syria's bad. And we're going to do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. As you know, they came out just the other day with this satellite photo of this known prison inside Syria, and the snow on one section of the roof was melted. And from that, they came on out, Assad is murdering thousands of people, and he's destroying the bodies to hide the evidence of his crime. And there are actually even some voices in the corporate media saying, oh, come on now. And as I pointed out on my website and on the show, that heat under that one section of the roof could be the prison kitchen. Could be the laundry with all the dryers running. We don't know. And again, on the principle of look for what should be there and isn't, if you go back and you look at pictures of crematoria, and I put up a whole bunch of them on my webpage, one feature they all share is a very tall smokestack, because they don't want that smell coming down to the ground. They want the wind to disperse it before it comes close to the ground. So what's missing in this photo of the roof with the melted snow? There's no smokestack. It's just more lies and more propaganda, trying to sell you a war in Syria. And I got to tell you, the American people are sick and tired of war. We've been living with war constantly for 16 years. And we're tired of it. We're tired of paying for it. We're tired of seeing our children come back in sheet metal boxes or in wheelchairs, or their brains fried from all the medications they're given, PTSD. I mean, this is a failed war policy. The fact that the U.S. government is still in all these countries, still talking about escalation, can't make any progress. They're literally bogged down in all these quagmires. This is turning into a war of attrition. And the United States is running out of material. They've run out of money. They're running out of manpower. It's time to pull back from this before the nation collapses. Looking back at the collapse of the former Soviet Union, a major contributing factor was the Soviet Union's military budget, where they felt they had to constantly match the U.S. in weapons. And they bankrupted their own country by focusing all of their money on the military. And that's what our government is doing to our country right now. Now, as you know, the other day, apparently Germany is yanking all their forces out of Turkey, in particular the Incirlik air base, over this argument because Ankara will not allow German members of German military police, rather, to visit the soldiers at Incirklik. And so now they're going to pull them all out, and Germany is looking for another airfield in the area that they can use to forward deploy their forces. So, again, a lot of faction fighting. A lot of faction fighting going on. Now, Erdogan is in Washington, and there's already been a bit of a stink because apparently there were Kurdish protesters outside the White House, and Erdogan's bodyguards basically attacked them. Bloody beatdown. 4 people seriously injured, 2 have been arrested, and there's a video of it where these Erdogan bodyguards just charge across the street and just start pounding on the protesters, knock them down, kick them in the face. That's not going to look good on the world press. And maybe Erdogan just doesn't really care of it. Over in Yemen, along with the bombing and strafing by Saudi Arabia, there's been a major outbreak of cholera. And it's just hitting the children. The hospitals are overflowing. And it's a humanitarian disaster by any reasonable description of that phrase. It is a humanitarian disaster. Let's see. Yeah, just talking about they can't find care. The hospitals are full. The doctor's offices are full. I'm wondering if this is really just the collapse of sanitation or if somebody has launched a biowarfare attack on the people of Yemen. Now, the Pentagon has just signed a new defense deal with the United Arab Emirates over a U.S. troop presence, which will allow the United States to send more troops and equipment to the region. Everybody's lining up for the coming war. And it looks like it's unstoppable. Over in Israel, another Gaza fisherman has been killed by Israeli forces. Muhammad Majid Baker, 28-year-old, was fishing with his brother when he was shot in the chest. And apparently this was part of an operation where Israeli forces detained 6 Palestinian fishermen and confiscated 2 boats. And they were fishing in Gaza's fishing areas. But Israel just likes... Okay. Sorry for the interruption. I'm responding to the control room here. We're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines if you want to call on in. Meanwhile, the International Committee of the Red Cross is saying that Gaza is on the brink of a systemic collapse from the electricity crisis, and this is part of Israel's starvation program. They keep cutting back on the supplies of fuel going in. Most people in Gaza do not have electricity 24 hours a day. In fact, they only have electricity a few hours a day, and they have to sort of plan on doing what they're doing during that time, cooking their meals. And, of course, without constant electricity, there's no refrigeration. And so even the limited amount of food that's being allowed into Gaza, a lot of that is being lost to spoilage. Now, turning to Korea, things are very tense there, and I think the attitude from the United States is fully on display because over at the United Nations yesterday, Nikki Haley was out there with one of these draconian statements: you are either supporting North Korea or you support us. You're either with us or you're our enemy. Like George Bush said, you're with us or you're with the terrorists. This call to choose sides. And a lot of the members of the United Nations don't want to get caught up in this. They don't want to choose sides. They see this as just another U.S. adventure, trying to take over yet another country, and they just don't want to get involved. Meanwhile, another worrying indication. The USS Carl Vinson and its strike group, which was over near the North Korean peninsula for exercises, supposedly, will now stay there. It will remain deployed in the region for an indefinite period of time. So they're rattling the sabers even more. This is a little interesting. The U.S. strike group headed by the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan is beginning a patrol in the Indo-Asia Pacific. They're not exactly saying exactly where it is, but apparently it's being escorted by the guided missile cruiser Shiloh, guided missile destroyers Barry, John S., as well as McCain, McCampbell, and Mustin, and aircraft from the carrier Air Wing 5. Here's the reason I think there is potentially something going on here. The USS Ronald Reagan is still contaminated from taking part in the Fukushima cleanup, or evacuation, if you will. And a lot of U.S. Navy sailors got very sick, and while they have tried to decontaminate the ship, they have not really been successful. And one of the reasons is because neutron radiation can actually turn non-radioactive materials into radioactive isotopes. And that means the actual metal of the ship itself is potentially radioactive, and there's no way to reverse that. So they're sending over an aircraft carrier that really, over time, makes its own crew ill. And we have to ask, is this going to be the sacrificial lamb? Are they going to sink the Ronald Reagan in somebody else's waters, get rid of the nuclear waste problem, and then blame North Korea for it? I mean, wouldn't be the first time. Remember the Maine, the USS Maine. Oh, it was destroyed by a Spanish torpedo. No, it was destroyed by an onboard fire. Or the Arizona and the sneak attack that everybody knew was going to happen. That's how these things get going. Now, the good news is South Korea wants to reopen communications with the North. The new South Korean President Moon Jae-in is saying he wants to improve relations with North Korea. And so they're saying their immediate priority is to reopen the lines of communication, just get the phones working again. Now, the biggest obstacle to doing that is, of course, the United States. And President Moon is dispatching a new ambassador to Washington, D.C. And Trump is still towing the war hawk line that diplomacy has failed, and he'll only accept discussions with North Korea under very limited circumstances, which basically amounts to you get rid of your nukes and your missiles first, and then maybe we'll do something nice for you. Now, let's talk about the economy. Bad day on the Dow. Stock sell-off. The corporate media is saying it's all because of all this stuff about Donald Trump, the uncertainty of the White House. I don't think so. I think reality is starting to catch up with a lot of the markets. The Dow closed down 372. That's going to make people nervous, and we might actually see a sell-off going around the globe later this evening. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. Needless to say, gold went up. At the same time, the stock market went down. But the economic news is really not good. And I can imagine probably a lot of people starting to think it's time to seek a safe haven for their wealth, which would certainly explain the spike in gold. People are dumping their stocks and they're starting to buy gold. Very good thing to do here. So, a little concerning, especially with the stock market headed down. The top 25 United States banks have a total of $222 trillion in derivatives exposure. Now, that is a lot. That is multiple times the gross domestic product. Now, as long as stock prices continue to rise and the U.S. economy stays stable, these extremely risky financial weapons of mass destruction will lie dormant. But if there is a major stock market correction, the derivatives will come due. And nobody has the money to fix that mess. U.S. household debt has now surpassed the 2008 high. It's hit a record $12.7 trillion. And it shouldn't be much of a surprise because for the last 100 years, our entire economic system has been based on borrowing money at interest from a privately owned central bank. And that bank, by design, creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt, which is why the debt continues to grow, both for American citizens, for the government, for the nation as a whole. There is no way to reverse it, short of nationalizing the bank and just writing it off. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. We got some callers waiting on the line. We're going to take their phone calls when we come back from these words from our sponsor. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before I take the phone calls, a little bit of breaking news here. Somebody just posted at whatreallyhappened.com reminding us all that on May 3rd, 2 months after this Comey memo implying Donald Trump obstructed justice was supposed to have been written, 2 months after that, Comey testified under oath before the Congressional Committee, quote, a situation where we were told to stop something for a political reason, that would be a very big deal. It's not happened in my experience. There's the smoking gun. This whole obstruction of justice thing is just another media fraud. So somebody very alert caught that. All right, let's take some phone calls. John in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I can't help going back to believing that we are going to end up with a President Pence, because even Tucker Carlson last night when he was talking to Brett Hume said he wants Trump to stop tweeting. Now, I know the Fox News is going centrist now. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, if we look at Trump, what we're getting is he's like a Kardashian reality TV figure. And President Pence, every time you look at him, like when he went to North Korea and he went to South Korea and he went to the DMZ, it's all these stoic pictures of him looking like Clutch Cargo. And now that we have all these fisticuffs breaking out all over our country at either the New Orleans Monument or Berkeley or Auburn, and now you have Erdogan's goons going out and beating down 60-year-old people right there on 23rd Street in Washington, D.C., the people don't want this in the country. We used to see this on TV in Europe at the G20, you know, galas and things like that, and we'd see cops with riot gear and billy clubs. Nobody wants this on this soil. And if Trump is, quote-unquote, made to be the figure who's causing all this divide and getting the people out to the streets, they're going to say, give us President Pence, because he's a very quiet, stoic-looking guy. And, I'm just afraid that he was selected for this office, because now you're like defending Seth Rich. Well, Seth Rich, his program is he just wanted that communist Bernie Sanders to get the nomination. Well, wait a minute. We don't know what Seth Rich's motivation was. Certainly the emails that he released to WikiLeaks indicated criminal actions being committed. And I think if Seth Rich had been a Bernie Sanders fan, he would have been working for Bernie Sanders' campaign. And instead he was working with the DNC and Hillary's campaign. And I think he's just one of those people who saw something in front of his eyes that he felt needed to be exposed to the public. And that was what he was trying to do. And from the way he did it through WikiLeaks, it's obvious he knew he was risking his life to do it. So I don't think we should make assumptions as to what Seth Rich's motives were, because we have no way of knowing. Okay, well, I just want to say that the American people, I think we had enough with the Clintons, and I'm just sorry that if you put Hillary Clinton up there, the whole country as a whole just hates that woman, and that's probably why a guy like Trump got. I mean, the blackmail can work in reverse. The blackmail could be, hey, Donald Trump, you are going to run for the nomination, and you are going to take the job as president, so we can get all this civil unrest and get the people unhinged in this country, so we can advance the police state over the people and shut us up. I'm sorry. I just think it's getting to the point where the people are not going to be allowed to dissent anymore.
They're definitely working that way here. But again, I try to apply Occam's razor to these situations and look for the simplest explanation for what's going on. I think what happened was that because everybody hated Hillary Clinton, they were aware of the past crimes and corruptions. That's why Donald Trump got on in, because the American people were sick of the Bushes and the Clintons and the establishment and the oligarchs, and Trump's election victory was a major, major upset. Just like Brexit was an upset, and now the globalists are trying to reassert their control by any means necessary. They could trigger a civil war. If they take Trump out, they could trigger a civil war, because already the liberal Democrats on these college campuses with their black hoods and everything, they're out there acting like brown shirts. Well, we're going to
quickly. What I want to ask, though, is there any evidence that Trump is going against the deep state? Because if the deep state is a guy like Mad Dog Mattis in the Pentagon's actually running the show, and they're putting troops on Russia's border, what is Trump doing to back that up?
It's looking to me like Trump is trying to reassert his authority, and that may be why there's a big push to get rid of him, along with the fact that with Comey gone, a lot of people are open to arrest and investigation. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to have to let you go. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones here. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call, and thanks to you and Claire. And I can't imagine just doing this every day, putting out the truth and taking the blows. And that's a real patriot. So that's my compliment to you.
Well, thank you.
And I think everybody watches your program already knows that.
Now, so someday they will erect a statue to me, and pigeons of the world shall rejoice.
Michael, there's an afterlife, and you will be rewarded for what you did in this life. That's what I believe, and I'm non-religious. So whatever. I think the good deeds, do get rewarded. But my question is this, and I meant that previous comment. But my question is this: a long time ago, I'm a long-time follower of Ron Paul, campaigned for him. I remember, I'm just guessing, like 12, 15 years ago, when the Internet was new, he came out and he said, be careful. When they start trying to control the Internet, you'll know what's going to hit the fan.
Yes.
And you're the perfect guy to ask this to, because I think this last We Cry, whatever that thing was, I think they're doing a beta test. And I think they're getting ready to... when you look at Bitcoin and how much the Internet has changed everybody's lives, I think they're going to disrupt the Internet and blame it on the Russians. Now, that's what I think is going to happen. I don't know, but I was wondering if you kind of thought this, that's a possibility.
Well, certainly when a while back I did write this article on the virtual 911 saying that the U.S. government might crash the net and blame a designated enemy for it, and I was wondering if maybe the WannaCry ransomware was the beginning of that, especially because of how quick they were to blame it on North Korea.
Wow. I didn't read that article. Great minds think alike, I guess, but I just think that, I don't know. They're going to do something. I got that feeling, because we're also dependent on the Internet.
That's the real risk here. I mean, it's critical that we're dependent on it. It's not like something they can take down, like baseball or something else. We're all dependent on it, and they could cause a huge amount of damage to the economy and the nation with these games. What their goal would be to find out some way where they could shut down individual website operators and turn the Internet into just another content delivery platform, sort of a TV set with more knobs and buttons on it. But again, that raises First Amendment issues. I remember back during Senator Exxon's attempt to impose government control on the net because of pornography, they were talking about actually licensing computer software compilers, which is impractical because anybody who really knows software can write a compiler if they want to. And there's even been talk that they may try and impose licensing on websites. And obviously that would be a very powerful tool to drive the independent media off the net by simply imposing gigantic fees on it.
Well, there's always a counter thing, and like the yin and the yang. There's the other side of it. I don't know. I think technology-wise, have you heard of the Steemit? The new website, Steemit?
No, I have not. Please enlighten us.
Wow. It's I don't know that much about it, but it's a website, kind of something like a YouTube, where you get paid in either dollars or virtual dollars for how much you comment, and I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but it's everybody's looking for an alternative to YouTube, and trying to find another avenue where they're not controlled by Google and, Facebook.
Well, there are a lot of them out there, and I'm not staying on top of them as much as I should. I mean, I've got my favorites. I've already gone to Scene Life, Gab, VK, Yandex, and DuckDuckGo as alternative search engines. But, the numbers for these corporate social media platform search engines are going down, and these new startups that are promising censorship-free communication, they're really taking off.
Yeah, well, I'll let you go here because I'm taking too much time. But I think what Steemit's doing is because with YouTube and they're cutting everybody's revenues off by their algorithms, and they're trying to filter out free speech. It's starting to go to it with this blockchain technology and the bitcoins and whatever. I think it's kind of like a race, and I don't know. I don't think you can stop free speech.
Well, ultimately, you are correct, and I've commented before that what we're seeing today it very much replicates the social upheaval that happened when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing, and all of a sudden books became affordable to the middle class, literacy soared, and ordinary people were starting to find out things that the rulers did not want them finding out. And there was a backlash, an attempt to block printing or block books being owned by the middle class. Ultimately, it all failed. And those institutions that could evolve and adapt to the new reality of a better educated population survived, and those entities that couldn't adapt went extinct. And we're seeing exactly the same thing happening right now.
Yeah, to quote the good book, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Thank you so much, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and let's see. Next call is Joe in Tennessee. Joe, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I've listened to you for a long time. This is the first time I've ever called you. I was really upset about the whole Seth Rich thing yesterday. I mean, I called my senators, my congressmen. I even called Bernie Sanders' office. And then they have a press conference, and Sean Spicer is asked about it, and he says no comment. I mean, here's the whole narrative of the Russia hacking story blown out of the water, and the press secretary of the president says no comment. It amazed me. And sometimes I wonder which side these people really on. I mean, the whole Seth Rich thing is, if it's true, that tells, it can destroy the whole power structure that's against Trump. And if you ask me,
actually, let's back off there. I mean, if the Seth Rich thing was true and he was assassinated for leaking to WikiLeaks, and that all starts to unravel. Remember, my pet theory about that email server is that Hillary Clinton was repeating the 1994 Chinagate scandal, where Bill Clinton, using his authority as president, declassified and authorized the transfer of sensitive military technology to China, and in exchange, Chinese money was being funneled into his re-election campaign. Well, again, there's family history on your side, and if you look at it, Hillary's email server was a perfect espionage setup. She's got the weak email server where those who are given the appropriate passwords can log in and acquire secrets, and she's got that charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. It's a perfect system for that kind of behavior. But a scandal on that scale is not just a threat to the Democrats, it's a threat to the entire government as a whole. And you get into a situation like that, one of the great secrets. Everybody's going to be working to keep it under wraps. Even Hillary Clinton's worst enemies are going to be working to protect it, if I am in fact right as to what really lies at the heart of all of this. It's the same thing with same thing with JFK assassination or 9/11 or all of that stuff. Everybody works to protect those secrets, even if they're enemies, because it's their job on the line.
Well, there's a financial guy that I listen to, and he says that Trump he can't have us lose total regard for government because he's going to need people to believe in the government to rebuild the government. But I think they're boxing him in to the point where his only option is to totally go for delegitimizing the people that are in power now. That's not necessarily delegitimizing the government. It's just delegitimizing the swamp creatures that inhabit our government. And I was just going to ask you one other thing about the Seth Rich thing. Do you think maybe this FBI investigation into Bernie Sanders' wife is a way to keep him on the reservation with all this?
It could very well be.
It's interesting it's interesting the timing of that. And when it first happened, I thought, what's behind this? Maybe, Hillary's, people are trying to punish him about, losing her the election. And then this Seth thing starts bubbling up again, and I'm thinking, well, that could be a way to keep him, quiet about it.
Well,
anyway,
I don't know that Bernie Sanders has anything, any information regarding Seth Rich, but certainly as we continue to find out just how crooked the Democratic primaries were last year, Hillary, who still apparently has ambitions for political office, certainly does not want Bernie Sanders coming on out and reiterating that he feels he was cheated, and so this investigation into his wife might be the hammer held over him to keep him quiet.
But I mean, if Seth Rich was murdered because his motive for releasing the emails was his, being upset about how they treated Bernie, maybe there is a little bit of loyalty in Bernie too, and it would upset him that his somebody that supported him like that was murdered. I mean, that's what I mean.
He
can't be all that bad.
We don't know that Seth Rich leaked that information to WikiLeaks specifically related to the treatment of Bernie Sanders. He may just have realized he was looking at evidence of massive election fraud and criminality and just decided that as a U.S. citizen, he could not sit still for that. I mean, I went through that experience all these years ago when I spotted that obviously bogus photo of Vince Foster and the gun he was alleged to have used on himself. And, like a good citizen, I am looking at evidence of a murder made to look like a suicide. See something, say something. We've all heard that. And so I tried to do something about it, and, of course, that was basically the end of my career in Hollywood. And
I was upset about that one, too.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, one other quick thing. This thing with Comey's notes, they have the Senate put out a letter to him, and they want all his notes, not just about the meeting about Flynn. They want the notes with Obama, the notes with Hillary and Lynch. So this could really backfire on the Democrats. I mean, if they want all his notes, my dad was a doctor, and he said never take notes, because then if you get what they call malpractice, they'll come back to haunt you. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, that was Grassley, and even Feinstein signed the letter. And it wasn't just particular to that meeting about Flynn. It was all the notes. So this guy, I think this could be Trump pulling another one of his traps and jiu-jitsu moves that he's so famous for.
Well, I'd like to see it happen. I have been waiting for 2 decades now for all of the corrupt, crooked people in Washington, D.C. to get their comeuppance. And unfortunately, at this point, the entire system is pretty much corrupt. There are some exceptions. Donald Trump certainly came into the White House as a neophyte, but the system may be corrupting him. Certainly Trey Gowdy is a straight shooter. So is Jason Chaffetz. But there are too few of these kind of people in that system. The vast majority of people who are in those positions are there to enrich themselves, aggrandize themselves, and they're there to basically just sell out to whoever shoves the most money at them.
Well, I think this is our last chance. If Trump isn't given the opportunity to save this country, I think the financial markets are going to. I think we're going to probably a war overseas and maybe a civil war here. So I just got to root for him because there's no other option. I mean, I hate to say it like that.
There isn't.
But anyway, thanks for listening to me, Michael. I'll call again when I get a chance.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Steve in California. Steve, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to share my TSA story with you. It happened about maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I asked a question, and I didn't get an answer. And they said, well, you probably want to contact TSA itself on the Internet. So I went on the email and emailed them. But my question was, when I was traveling back to Indiana, I had my computer with me. And, of course, they did the tape thing to see if there was any residue, bomb residue or powder residue or anything, bomb explosive material that was used in the computer. Of course, it was not, and I got to go on my way, but the question I asked was, if we understand correctly that in Iraq, the IEDs are the size of a portable CD player or smaller than that, then why aren't you scanning the other stuff that people have? Like I had an iPod and a portable CD player, and none of these things are being scanned. They just go after the computer, and the guy looked at me like, just deer in the headlights, like a good question, but I don't have an answer, so he told me to contact the TSA. I did so, and I received an email back. Actually, I received a letter, I believe it was, and an email. And the only thing they came back with the answer was, thank you for your concern. That was it.
Well, like I said earlier in the program, you have much more room for nefarious purposes with a modern single-lens reflex camera. They're all digital now, but film one's the same way. Once you take that lens off, there's a little concise little space back there that you could do something nefarious with, like maybe smuggle drugs. I remember when I traveled with a single-lens reflex camera, they'd make you take the lens cap off, and they would look through it to make sure there wasn't something in between the lens and the camera itself. But again, this focus on the laptops, I have no idea what that is about, and maybe they just want all the laptops down in an area in the cargo bay where they can be copied off over the Wi-Fi, because I don't know if you've noticed this or not, gone are the days when laptops had a physical switch to turn off the Wi-Fi. Now it's under software control, which means it probably can be turned on remotely. And they could just sort of help themselves to whatever's on that laptop during the flight. I mean, they would have hours and hours to basically copy off what's on those laptops down in the cargo bay.
Yeah. Hey, last question for you. You talked about this WannaCry ransomware that was going around, 99 countries, 75,000 already victimized by it. And you mentioned the backup using a portable hard drive, which I agree with 100%. But my question is, if you leave the portable hard drive still connected to your PC when you do your backup and forget to disconnect it through the USB, can they go through your computer to your portable hard drive and erase that and steal the information that way?
Well, there wouldn't really be much purpose because it's just a copy of what's on the system drive. But at this point, the NSA and CIA have bored so many holes through our systems. At this point, you have to assume that anything is going to be possible. And if you have a reason to have private information that you don't want anybody to see, you're going to have to get yourself an air-gapped computer. And again, the concern now is finding one where you know for a fact that the Wi-Fi is turned off. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Steve, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call and then get back to the news here. Captain Jack in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello there, Mike. Well, I tell you what, you're in a lucky spot over there. I really loved it. I was over there during the Apollo 11 mission up in Kaonohi. Is that still in operation up there?
Yeah, the tracking station is still there, and it's obviously servicing a lot of satellites. Claire and I hiked out past there a while back, and you could just see the dish tracking across the sky.
Oh, man, that was a beautiful place. Went inside a big tunnel up there. Well, anyway, what I called about, Mike, is I read a few things about this laptop stuff and everything on the airplanes, and I don't think it's because of the explosions. I think it's because they could take over the control of the aircraft through the entertainment system of the aircraft, especially with the 300 series aircraft from Europe, and fly that airplane and crash it. I think that may be the reason.
Well, the simple solution, and I think this is already the case, is the in-cabin entertainment internet is not connected to the flight control systems. They're completely isolated from each other. I mean, that's an obvious safety precaution.
Well, I hope so, but I just hope that's that it is, because I just don't think they can put like you say, a big enough explosive in the laptops to do that. Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here, but the story just feels bogus to me.
That sure is. All right, Mike. Well, good talking to you. I'm broadcasting your program on 87.7 here in North Florida with 25 watts. I get out about 10 miles, so you're around up here.
Well, greetings to all of our listeners in Florida, and one of the hard things about doing independent media is we never really know what our reach is. We know what the streams are going out, but we don't know all the people who are recopying the show and putting it on YouTube, and certainly all the micro-broadcasters. We know we have a lot of micro-broadcasters out there who are carrying the RBN programming, and we're very, very grateful for those people helping us to reach a larger audience.
Yeah, roger that. We're trying to put the word out. Okay, buddy. Well, good listening to you and good talking to you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Tom in Indiana. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I'd like to say that maybe Comey ought to be looked at for obstruction of justice with the Seth Rich computer. It seems that either the FBI has it or the New York Police Department has it. And it seems like he was in the proper place to squelch any information about it.
Well,
and I think that would be obstruction.
Again, we had that story that said the FBI had the information from the laptop showing the communications with WikiLeaks 96 hours after his assassination. And so, yes, that would be obstruction of justice to bury that. But we don't even need to go there. James Comey, when he gave his press conference about Hillary's email server and the handling of classified information, he went down the list of felony violations of Title 18 committed by Hillary Clinton and then said, we're not going to charge. And that, to me, was obstruction. Anyway, listen, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. Bye. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take one more phone call, and then we're going to close the lines while I get some more news done here. So, Stephen in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha to you, Michael. Aloha, aloha. I just wanted to mention that I recognized one of the callers about 3 callers ago, and his inflection and everything sure sounded like Steve Pesniak, who's an old spook. And I also wanted to talk about the NDAA, I think was renewed or passed before Barry and his cartel got out of the White House, where they said, you can spend money on propaganda. It's illegal. It's legal now, right?
Yes.
Well, it's perfect timing. It's perfect timing. I think it was like when Trump was the nominee that was passed. So it just shows you that there is a war going on, and it's pretty blatant.
Yeah, it really is, because if you remember, all of this spying on Donald Trump actually increased after he won the election. They were spying on him during the transition period to gain some kind of information that would allow him to be manipulated into appointing a bunch of people for the White House staff who were going to be still loyal to the deep state agenda. And again, we heard reports of a coming serious White House staff shakeup. It needs to happen. Trump needs to get people in the White House who are going to be loyal to him, who are not compromised by other. Frankly, I think Donald Trump ought to get a bunch of people from outside the Beltway. Just go on out and find good businessmen, good engineers, good whatever, who can actually do the work of helping in the administration, who are not already tangled up with the swamp. That's Trump's biggest mistake in terms of his White House staffing, is he went in there saying he was going to drain the swamp, and instead he turned the faucet on and allowed the swamp to pour on into the White House.
Well, I just wanted to say that there's a propaganda war going on for all our minds, and you got to use great discernment.
Okay, well, yeah, but the propaganda is getting so obvious, and as I said, we just found out, going back to CNN's own transcripts on Comey's testimony before Congress 2 months after this memo about obstruction of justice was supposedly written, and he testified under oath that nobody had approached him about handling a case or altering the case for political reasons. So we got him in a lie. We got him in a lie. This is Comey's revenge for being fired.
Blessings, Michael. Blessings.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. We're going to close the phone lines for a little while and get some news done. I just got an email from somebody who was an in-flight technician for Panasonic, and basically confirms what I said before. All the little TV screens and the entertainment stuff in the armrests, they are not connected to the avionics system. So this idea that somebody could take a laptop and take over control of the aircraft, that is definitely not going to fly. So something else is going on. And here's another issue. Okay, if it's really worried about bombs in laptops, if it explodes in the cargo hold, it's still a problem. So there's some other issue going on there. Now, we were talking about the economy before, and a lot of focus is now coming down on Home Capital Group, which is, for lack of a better word, it's crashing. It's crashing and burning following massive, massive losses. They're already talking about a taxpayer bailout, because after all, banks are holy and banks are sacrosanct, and we can never let a bank go bust here, no matter how much it costs the ordinary people. Interesting story out of Zero Hedge. The new, latest, improved theory behind the stalled economy, well, it's all the fault of you retirees. You're just hoarding too much cash. That's the problem. They're hoarding cash and keeping it for their retirement instead of spending it into the economy. They don't want to fix the problem. They're just looking for somebody to blame. It's the retirees. They're living too long. They're keeping too much cash. It's the millennials. They're not spending enough. Well, they're not earning enough. Now, one of the points of contention regarding the H-1B visas or offshoring is how much IT offshores to India. But apparently that is starting to come apart, and India's IT market is actually crashing. They're going into a slump. And whether it's the advent of automated customer support systems or just too many people complaining that they can't understand the people at customer support, but they're estimating something over 500,000 layoffs over the next 3 years. So that's starting to come apart over there. Now let's get back to the wonderful world of retail, because as you know, there is a meltdown in the brick and mortar stores. They like to blame online sales, and a lot of these brick and mortar retailers are trying to move online, and they're discovering that it's just as hard to sell product to people without any money online as it was in the store. And now, ironically enough, some online retail startups are going to dip their toe into actually having a brick and mortar presence. And a good example of that is Casper Sleep Incorporated. Now, Casper Sleep is you order a mattress from them. It's delivered directly to your home. But now they're making a deal with Target to actually have the mattresses on the floor, so to speak, inside Target. Even though looking around, it's very obvious retail is in serious, serious trouble. I think I mentioned on Monday when Claire and I did our little mini vacation away from home over the weekend, and I went over to the windward side. And I went to the Radio Shack to get some little bits, heat shrink tubing, things like that. And they were having their going out of business sale. And there was a lot of empty retail spaces all over, not just the mall, but just driving down the main drag there in Kaonohi. A lot of empty retail places. It's not good out there. It's not good. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Story over at Investment Watch Blog. They're talking about the meltdown in Venezuela, the economic crisis, and economic war has been waged against Venezuela going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. And the people are hungry, they're desperate, they're eating their pets, they're eating pigeons, whatever they can find. And they're putting pressure on the government to do something, except nobody knows what to do. Things are that bad. And you need to keep an eye on Venezuela, because when the economic crash hits here, and it may be starting with today's Dow, things are going to get rough. Things are going to get very rough. Now then, turning over to France, Macron has just delivered a bit of a surprise to his pro-Brussels backers by saying that he does not think it's taboo to call for changes in the European Union Treaty. And basically saying the European Union's need for deep reforms is so dire that maybe it's time to change that EU treaty. And that is going to be a bit of a wake-up call for Brussels and for Angela Merkel, who thought that by making sure Macron won the election that France would just go back to being an obedient little country, and all of a sudden, Macron is starting to talk the way Marine Le Pen was talking. Apparently, the Netherlands remains without a government 61 days after the country's general election, because the way it works over there is those parties who get the most votes, but not a majority, have to form a coalition government, and the talks keep breaking down. And apparently the sticking point remains the question on immigration. To continue with open borders or to start saying we have to control our borders and control who comes in to our country. And that appears to be getting in the way of actually getting the government working. Who knows, life might actually be better in the Netherlands if they don't have a central government. I think there was another country, I think it was Belgium, went without a central government for like a year, and things really improved for the people. Apparently, support for the Brexit is continuing to grow, even after the election is over and done with. And everybody who's part of the Remainers, who's been campaigning for a new election or a new referendum or a new this or a new that, they're definitely struggling because right now 68% of people in this poll are saying they want to see the Brexit take place. And only 22% are saying they want Prime Minister Theresa May to ignore the result of the EU referendum last year. To heck with this will of the people thing. All those British subjects, they made a mistake in their election. They didn't vote the way they were supposed to. Now, and Brussels is continuing to throw roadblocks across the path. Apparently now the EU, the European Union's top court, has now ruled that every national and regional parliament in the European Union must sign off on some of the elements of the future agreements for Brexit. In other words, the negotiations for Brexit are no longer London and Brussels, but it's London and Brussels plus Munich plus Paris plus blah, blah, blah down the road. It's just a roadblock. They're just trying to make it as hard as possible for Great Britain to carry out the will of the British people. Dirty politics. Here we go. Now then, interesting little article. This came out of LouRockwell.com, and it's called Sheer Lunacy on Campus. And we have been talking about how so-called higher education today has really turned into liberal indoctrination. And it really, for those of us who went to university back in the 70s, for example, you can't even recognize it anymore. And it's going down the list of all these things. The University of California, Hastings College of the Law, has added a chill zone, which is located in the library, and it has, just like a nursery school, mats for naps and beanbag chairs. And before or after a snooze, students can also use the place to do yoga or meditate. The University of Michigan Law School helped its students weather their Trump derangement syndrome by enlisting the services of an embedded psychologist in a room full of bubbles and Play-Doh. Remember, that came out at the time. And apparently to reduce pressure on law students, Joshua M. Silverstein, a law professor at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, thinks that every American law school ought to basically eliminate C grades and set its good academic standing grade point average at the B level. In other words, your report card is now a participation trophy. And what they're basically doing is they're making it obvious that a university degree these days doesn't really mean anything at a time when student loans are just skyrocketing. Higher education has been turned into another scam. Get them onto the campus, get them on the student loans here, let them riot around, finger paint, whatever, so it makes them think that they've got some kind of an educational advantage over the high schoolers, and then kick them out into the real world. Amazing here. Now then, getting on back to airlines. Up in Canada, They are introducing a new passenger bill of rights. It was introduced by the Transportation Minister, Mark Garneau. And basically, if this is carried through into law, it establishes rights for passengers on airlines, including such things as airlines will not be allowed to take passengers from a flight against their will. And there are other aspects like foreign ownership limits for airlines, requires railways to install voice and video recorders in locomotives. Keep an eye on those engineers. And other improvements to transparency and efficiency in the freight rail industry. And they have a really good one up there. Again, when Claire and I were living in Washington State, we'd drive up into Vancouver. And I remember this one time seeing this absolutely gorgeous locomotive. It was green and brass and just sparkling clean and just going on by, towing all these cars and everything. And if you're my age, and I was born at a time before common jet travel, trains were it. And so trains were things that we wanted to do when we grew up. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hey, I want to talk about the EU. You got to change the name to the PU.
Yeah, I'll go for that one.
They stink. Of course, they stink. Hey, Mike, I'm thinking of trains. I used to buy those model rail. I'm 46, but I used to buy those model railroad magazines when those people in their basements had the gigantic, remember the gigantic layouts of trains.
Oh yeah, I had one of those when I was a kid. Oh and my two younger brothers got involved in that, and we all worked on that. We had a really nice rail setup.
Well, I just couldn't afford the LGB side of that.
Well, what's really interesting is there's a hobby shop that I go to every once in a while down here, and while I'm not into those toys any longer, I don't have the space for it or the time or the money. But what they're doing now, where they've got little tiny cameras in the locomotives, so you can see the engineer's view, and they have computers that will control the switches, and it's amazing what they're able to do with these things now. I mean, when I had it, it was basically, you'd turn up the speed thing down, and you'd have to flip the little track switches by hand.
Switching gears, well, from trains to railroads and bridges, what's your take on the One Belt, One Road? I think it's fantastic what the Russians and the Chinese are doing, Mike, with that.
Well, it certainly is going to have advantages. It's a high-speed rail system, and it's connecting China and Russia with Europe, and it will allow for the transportation of products much more quickly than loading them on a cargo ship and sending them around the Indian Ocean to the Suez Canal. So it really is a very good idea. Obviously, shipping companies are not at all happy with that. And again, though, it's going to be the backbone for an economic system that is not using the U.S. dollar, and that, of course, is a threat to the Federal Reserve.
And that's 65% of the world's population over there, right?
Yes.
There you go. Checkmate. Game over. Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to switch over to Jim in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what. I love your program, and I'm just really upset about the fact that Robert Mueller was named special counsel for the FBI Russia Trump probe.
Okay.
This guy is dirty as hell. I was actually fortunate enough to do an interview with Susan Lindauer. Are you familiar with her?
Yes.
Well, anyway, she talked about the fact that, George Bush knew the attack was coming and the fact that there was planes flying into buildings and what have you. But Robert Mueller was named to the FBI just prior to 9/11.
Yes.
This guy is so dirty, and I'm just trying to think, Michael, who in the hell named him? I mean, was it Trump administration? How in the hell did he get named into this? Because he's dirty as hell.
Well, let's see. Apparently this came out of the Justice Department. And Deputy Attorney General Rod J. Rosenstein just announced it. I'm looking at the story right now.
he should be fired directly, and so should Mueller, because he is a Washington insider who has covered up many. I don't know if it was Waco or Oklahoma City or whatever,
that was before his time.
Been involved. He's been actually covering up things for a long time. He is dirty as hell, and Donald Trump ought to get rid of this guy, and whoever appointed him, get rid of him yesterday. I'm sorry.
Here's the problem.
Anyways,
here's the problem. Okay, it's impossible to find anybody who's inside the federal government who's actually clean. They're all dirty. They're all, again, with those precious few exceptions like Trey Gowdy and Jason Chaffetz, they're all compromised. They've all done things to grab these seats of power and wealth that can be used as leverage against them. And yeah, if they're putting Mueller in charge of this, it's going to be a frame-up. It's going to be a kangaroo court. All right, well, listen.
Just freeze yourself. Thank you, Mike.
All right,
Bye.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I was looking into Robert Mueller's biography, and I discovered something that should send chills down your spine. When Robert Mueller was the director of the FBI, his deputy director was James Comey. It's a rather incestuous little circle, and clearly the Department of Justice is now adversarial to the Donald Trump administration. It does seem like they're all ganging up on him. They want him gone. They're trying to send a message to the American people. No, you do not get to choose your leaders anymore. We will choose them for you because we are so much smarter than you are. All right, let's take a couple more phone calls, then we're going to get back to the news. Herman in Georgia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. How you doing?
Doing okay.
There's two things. One, what about, since Jason, is it Chavez, might be under some undue influence, what about him as a FBI director?
Maybe. I don't know that he's been approached or he would consider it. Unfortunately, a lot of the people who were under consideration have decided they don't actually want the job, or they're being warned off of it. That sadly includes Trey Gowdy. A couple of days ago he said he was interested in the job, and now all of a sudden he's saying no, he doesn't want to get involved.
And yeah, just heard of that. And while on the commercial, my second choice was Sheriff David Clark out of Milwaukee, who campaigned with Trump. But while you had on the commercial, I just have seen an article here that he just accepted a job in the Department of Homeland Security.
I had seen that, yes.
So I guess the only person else I could think of is someone that, like out of the New York office, a FBI agent that is more righteous and honest. Maybe Trump could look there to elevate them.
I got to tell you right now, I think Trump is struggling to reassert himself as president, but he let the swamp into the White House, and they basically, at this point, it seems like he's being controlled. His own Department of Justice just appointed Mueller to head this investigation into the Russia connection. Yeah, we're seeing basically a coup d'etat taking place here in before our very eyes, and it's very hard to watch, to be very honest.
Well, you were right. Him going in so naive of what's going on in Washington. He should have taken somebody's advice and did not.
Well, yeah, he should have. Anyway, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. You were talking about how the Brits have an approval for the Brexit vote of like 60%.
68.
I would be willing to bet that our polls would be about the same for Trump right now. Democrats and Republicans. I think people realize what's going on. And, I think there's some hard left-wingers, mainly senior citizens that may be against Trump, but I think the overwhelming majority of Americans are for Trump and want to back him and believe that he was legitimately elected. What do you think?
Well, we all acknowledge he was legitimately elected. We know there was a lot of election fraud last year, but it all served Hillary Clinton. There just wasn't enough of it. But right now, the corporate media and Trump's enemies are basically trying this spaghetti approach. They're throwing everything they can at him in the hope that some of it will stick in the public mind, that the public will say, well, you know, surely amid all this smoke, there's got to be at least one fire. And so that seems to be the tactic they're using right now. And it is very frustrating. Every time they come out with another lie, like this Comey memo, and we find out that a lie, well, okay, tomorrow there'll be another lie. That's where we are right now. Each new day, a new lie against the President of the United States of America. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the lines. I got some more news to get to, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting a little more background information about the Seth Rich situation. The detective who has gone public recently about evidence of communication with WikiLeaks on Seth Rich's laptop was not the only one. Apparently, right after Seth Rich was murdered, Seth Rich's family hired their own private investigator, Rob Wheeler, and he determined immediately that, yes, Seth Rich had been in communication with WikiLeaks and had been the source of the DNC leaks. And apparently, the police ordered him to stop investigating. And all they would say is orders from high up. But apparently the police knew that Seth Rich was the leak to WikiLeaks, and they kept quiet so that they could sell this whole story about Russia hacking the DNC based on CrowdStrike, which has already pulled back from their analysis. And the Democratic National Committee never allowed anybody else to investigate the servers, to do a forensic analysis. They just said, we have these people that we pay, and they're saying it was Russia. Just take our word for it. And they're still pushing Russia, 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 Russia. And now apparently they've got former FBI Director Robert Mueller is leading the kangaroo court to try and dig up something on Donald Trump. And I'm dubious about his being able to remain in office. They're just ganging up on him. It's a big dog pile on Donald Trump. Okay, let's get on to some other stuff here. Still talking about the WannaCry ransomware. And we know that ultimately the fault for WannaCry and a lot of other cybercrime rests with the NSA and the CIA, who have developed these hacking tools that have been leaked out onto the dark web, along with working with hardware providers to literally put backdoors into all of our electronics for the convenience of the spy agencies to spy on us in complete violation of the Fourth Amendment. And, of course, these exploits are then discovered by the criminals, who will then plunder us at will. But there may be another villain. This is reported over at The Verge, and they're quoting an article out of the New York Times where a sociologist, Zeynep Tefouki, places the blame squarely on Microsoft for its decision to stop supporting older Windows versions. Now, WannaCry primarily hit Windows XP, and apparently Microsoft has now issued a patch for Windows XP for this exploit. But Microsoft's marketing strategy of forcing us to buy a new operating system every few years for their profitability now has a clear downside, because they stopped supporting these older versions of Windows, which are still in wide use, and left everybody vulnerable. So there's a lot of blame to go around here. But again, it gets back to this idea that the U.S. government, rather than protecting the safety, security, and privacy of computer users, went the other way and said, we've got to pry them open. We've got to be able to just go in at will and look at anybody's email, look at anybody's bookkeeping, look at anything that they've got. And we know it's not always for honorable purposes. If you remember that Seattle APEC, U.S. government agencies agencies were caught breaking into the computers of conference attendees and stealing business intelligence, corporate espionage, for the benefit of Bill Clinton's cronies, give them an advantage in contract bidding. And that's not what they're supposed to be paid for, but that's the way they were used. And even though the first version of WannaCry has been disabled by that 22-year-old over in London, you still need to get these patches on there, because other people are going to be using these NSA tools. The cat is out of the bag. They're all over the place. And they're going to be using them. So thank you, National Security Agency. You've really made the world a better place. Now, Cisco is warning that some products might have the WannaCrypt vulnerability, and apparently it goes to the fact that a lot of devices have embedded Windows versions in them as sort of a default operating system to run it. And that means these devices, routers, switchers, whatever, are also vulnerable. And these hardware devices cannot be patched. By the way, speaking of that gentleman over in London, he was offered a $10,000 reward for stopping the WannaCry ransomware in its track, and he's turned around and he says he's going to donate it to charity, which I think was a great thing for him to do. And he's saying he doesn't want fame and he doesn't want money, and basically trying to go back to his life as it has been up until now. Over in Washington, D.C., at the Union Station, there was a little bit of a hack there. Apparently on Monday, they have these giant screens inside the station for train information and commercials, and apparently somebody found out a way to put porn onto those screens during rush hour. And apparently this is not the only place it's happening. The hackers are able to get into these giant screen systems and just put up all kinds of stuff. And that comes under the heading of a prank, but again, it underscores the fact that globally, the IT infrastructure is fragile. It is delicate. And there needs to be immediately the development of some new protocols for the net that makes it harder for these people to hide. We need to have a mechanism to guarantee that when an IP hits your server, that it's really the originating IP and not a spoof. In the case of hackers who are using multiple leaps across machines, there needs to be a way to backtrace to the originating machine. It just makes sense. Now, maybe the government already has something like that we're not allowed to use. For example, on your telephone, the caller ID. Most people don't understand there are two caller ID codes in the telephone system. One of them is the consumer caller ID, which is the one that appears on your phone when somebody calls you, but that can be spoofed. That can be faked. Then there's the other internal caller ID that is far more secure, but you're not allowed to use that. That is strictly there just for law enforcement. Now, here's an interesting story. Apparently over in Taiwan, there was a gentleman who got, the PC got infected with the ThunderCrypt ransomware, and he literally used the email link on the warning page that your system has been encrypted, and he wrote them an email and said he only makes $400 a month. And the ransomware creators sent him the key because he didn't have the money. And wow, you got to tip your hat for somebody who has that little bit of sympathy for their victims. Now here's a really, really cool story. You know about all these smart, intelligent toys that are on Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and a lot of concern about spying on them. Apparently there is this 11-year-old cyber ninja, Ruben Paul. He's a 6th grader at a school in Austin, Texas, and he had this robotic teddy bear named Bob, and he basically hacked into it. and showed how it could be used for bad purposes. And apparently he was invited to this cybersecurity conference in the Netherlands. And again, we're seeing these computer-enabled devices that are being put on the market, and inevitably the rush is get the product out there, get the money, and they're turning out to be very, very vulnerable. We keep hearing all these stories about these Internet of Things devices, Internet-connected devices, and how they're being compromised and turned into botnets for advertising, spamming, or DOS attacks. And if Trump is able to survive the current onslaught, I think along with his Vaccine Safety Commission and his Election Integrity Commission, I do think there needs to be a commission set on up to look at ways of enforcing or improving security on all these devices. Because the WannaCry ransomware is a wake-up call. If somebody took the worm component of that and instead of ransomware as a payload, hypothetically, put in a sleeper program that doesn't make itself obvious. There's already one out there using the same exploit, and it's turning people's machines into cryptocurrency miners. And your machine's running slow, and you're not exactly sure why, and that's it. But you don't know that there's a virus because nothing comes up on the screen saying you've been infected. And for some reason, all these commercial antivirus security software systems don't seem to see the things that have the NSA code in them. Think about that for a while. So, hypothetically, somebody with malicious intent takes the worm component of this WannaCry and they bundle it with a piece of software that just sits on your computer for maybe 6 months and then just formats the drive. After 6 months, this thing is going to be everywhere, infecting government computers, corporate computers, banking computers. And people will go to their backup tapes to restore, and the malware is already on there because it was caught with the backups, and the instant it comes up and sees what the date is, it formats the drive again. So there does need to be something done. This has gone on way too long. We're all being victimized by cybercrime. And we do need to secure the IT infrastructure because it's not just hobbyists and geeks anymore. We are all dependent on a secure, working internet and computer experience. Companies have been put out of business from malware. I know I actually worked with one briefly many years ago when I was an Amiga developer. Some malware got onto the master disk going to the duplication company for a space shuttle simulator, and the backlash put the company out of business. Apparently, Bell Canada has been hacked. 2 million account details swiped by mystery miscreants. So, again, it's just wide open. And it's time to do something about it other than spending huge amounts of money on security software, which obviously is not providing any security. Now they're worried about a vulnerability in Google Chrome on Windows that could expose the user credentials. This is coming from Bosko Stankovic at Defense Code LLC. And apparently the vulnerability in the default configuration of the latest version of Chrome allows malicious websites to trick users into downloading what's called a shell command file without prompting the user, as it would normally do with other downloads. There is something in there that allows this file to be downloaded without your awareness and then executed on your computer. And up and running, this shell command file allows the attacker to gain access to your username, your Microsoft LAN Manager password hash, and that leaves you open to other attacks using the so-called server message block relay attack. I think one of the problems is that over time, the operating systems and software have become way too complex. And we call it bloatware or feature creep. And it's driven by the marketing people who say, well, we need to sell a new version of this software this year, so we've got to put on all kinds of new stuff. And new protocols and new this and new that. It builds up layer on layer on layer on layer. And it's impossible for any one individual to have a grasp of what's going on in there. Now, one of the things I loved about the Commodore VIC-20 and its ilk back then was, first of all, if anything happened to it, you turn it off, turn it on, it's back in its factory state. Second, it was simple enough where you could understand what was going on inside it. You could learn about it and see if something odd was going on. Today's Windows systems are so complex, and with the later operating systems, much of it is actually hidden from the end user. There are sections of the operating system that you cannot go and inspect to see if there's a problem. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, how are you?
Doing okay.
This Bell Canada hack, I don't know whether you know or not, but Bell Canada, Rogers, Cogeco, these internet service providers up in Canada, they're protected under the umbrella of the CRTC, a taxpayer-funded organization. And, I don't feel sorry for Bell for getting hacked whatsoever because, they charge us outrageous prices. I'm not a Bell customer anymore. I haven't been for a long time, but I know that the CRTC, on behalf of these people, will shut down competition that they cannot compete with because they've done it recently with someone that came out with like a cheaper cell phone policy, and it wasn't that long ago. And also, earlier you were mentioning something about the housing market in Canada. That Home Credit company that is in trouble. The CEO of the St. Joe's Hospital, Kevin Smith, he also sits on the board of directors of another company called Ontario Pension Plan.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan is called HOOP. What it is a private pension plan company through all of the people that work, throughout Canada in the healthcare industry. And he also was sitting on that Home Capital. So he was on these three boards, and he manipulated all of this this quote unquote high interest line of credit that obviously they burned through, and
Yeah.
I mean, does this sound familiar?
Yeah, it sounds very, very familiar. And again, where's the government oversight on any of this? Or is the Canadian government, like the U.S. government, just so in love with the financial sector that they just look the other way? Anyway, Al, we're going to have to let you go. We've got to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back here. We're going to take one more phone call in the last segment of our show, and then, of course, the sign-off until tomorrow. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today. And, boy, the hackers are really pounding on my server. I'm going to have to be working on my security as soon as the show is over. We're going to take one more phone call. George in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was just talking about Trump and draining the swamp, but it's hard to believe he really wanted to drain the swamp when one of the first executive orders he did actually weakened lobbying rules for administration officials and former administration officials. And also, he was talking about how Hillary was in bed with Goldman Sachs, and how many people from Goldman Sachs does he actually have in his administration?
Well, I'm wondering how much of that was Donald Trump himself versus Donald Trump being convinced by Reince Priebus and his other advisors to go with these people. Like I said, the problem with Donald Trump is that he came into the White House as dangerously naive about the reality of D.C. politics as Jimmy Carter did. Jimmy Carter was not prepared for what happened to him. They just blindsided him, and the same thing's happening to Donald Trump.
Well, one of the people from Goldman Sachs is Steve Bannon, which is one of his major campaign advisors.
Well, there's a lot of people floating around who have previously been with Goldman Sachs, and I'm not ready to say that they're all necessarily crooks, but probably they're all very loyal to Goldman Sachs because I imagine the severance packages include a block of stock that they're going to want to do very, very well. But getting on back to that executive order, I thought the first executive order actually banned government officials from being lobbyists for something like 5 years, and that.
So that's what the Obama one did, but Trump weakened it so that they only couldn't, I guess, lobby
I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to,
for 5 years.
I'm going to have to go back and look at that because my recollection of that is a little different than yours. Okay?
I'll just leave you with 3 words: lock him up.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I really, really would. But I got to tell you, it's just so obvious that we're seeing this Bush-Clinton CIA cocaine cartel. They're scared of everything becoming exposed. And they're clearly acting in a panic. They're clearly acting in a panic.
Trump's the one acting in a panic, firing the FBI director when he's investigating his administration for Russian ties.
Actually, my understanding is that Trump fired Comey because of the interference with the investigation into Hillary Clinton. I mean, there are no Russian ties. There are no Russia ties. There are no Russia ties. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Yeah, I think this gentleman's memory is a little bit faulty. I know it's a Democratic talking point that Trump fired Comey to stop the Russia investigation. Obviously, with the appointment of Robert Mueller, that did not work, even had it happened. Comey was fired because he basically, when he went out to defend Hillary Clinton, he exceeded his authority. And he basically misquoted the law or misapplied the law. And Comey's firing is why the deep state is now in trouble. Because they're dealing with a president who would be open to seeing some indictments, trials, and prison. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. Get to work on some new security for the server because we're just under heavy, heavy attack. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please share what you know with everybody that you know. Copy off the original articles when you can get to my server. Send them around. And please, call your local conservative talk radio show and introduce them to republicbroadcasting.org. Ask them to carry our programs. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.